and welcome to the Phenomenal Files. Because Derek's argument is not completely finished yet, I decided to do a little bit of a special for us. I have compiled a whole bunch of different newspaper reports. Some of these were collected through a website I can't remember the name of right now, but I will put in the comments box. And others were collected from my own research. A large amount of them was collected by Steve Quayle in his book, Antarctica, Kingdom Under the Ice, I think is the title of it. Empire Under the Ice, something like that. But all of them have been verified, they're all real, and they're all extremely interesting. So we're actually going to read through a couple of them. And depending on how long this ends up being, because I have quite a few of them here, we might do the Twinning Memo as well. So we're going to start with the aforementioned article that we talked about in the first episode called, this is in the Roswell Daily Record, and it is Harassed Rancher Who Located Saucer, Sorry He Told About It. W. Brazel, 48, Lincoln County rancher living 30 miles south of Corona, today told his story of finding what the Army at first described as a flying disc, but the publicity which attended his find caused him to add that if he ever found anything else short of a bomb, he sure wasn't going to say anything about it. Brazel was brought here late yesterday by W.E. Whitmore of radio station KGFL, had his picture taken, and gave an interview to the record and to Jason Callahan, sent here from the Albuquerque Bureau of the Associated Press to cover the story. The picture he posed for was sent out over AP telephoto wire sending machine specifically set up in the record office by R.D. Adair, AP wire chief sent here from Albuquerque, for the sole purpose of getting out his picture, and that of Sheriff George Wilcox, to whom Brazel originally gave information of his find. Brazel related that on June 14, he and an 8-year-old son, Vernon, were about 7 or 8 miles from the ranch house of the J.B. Foster Ranch, which he operates, when they came upon a large area of bright wreckage made of rubber strips, tinfoil, and a rather tough paper and sticks. At the time, Brazel was in a hurry to get his round made, and he did not pay much attention to it. But he did remark about what he had seen, and on July 4th, he, his wife, Vernon, and a daughter, Betty, age 14, went back to the spot and gathered up quite a bit of the debris. The next day, he first heard about the flying discs, and he wondered if what he had found might be the remnants of one of these. Monday, he came to town to sell some wool, and while here, he went to see Sheriff George Wilcox and, quote, whispered kind of confidential-like, quote, that he might have found a flying disc. Wilcox got in touch with the Roswell Army Airfield and Major Jesse A. Marcel, and a man in plain clothes accompanied him home, where they picked up the rest of the pieces of the disc and went to his home to try to reconstruct it. According to Brazel, they could not reconstruct it at all. They tried to make a kite out of it, but could not do that, and could not find any way to put it back together so that it could fit. Then Major Marcel brought it to Roswell, and that was the last he heard of it until the story broke that he had found a flying disc. Brazel said that he did not see it fall from the sky and did not see it before it was torn up, so he did not know the size or shape it might have been, but he thought it might have been about as large as a tabletop. The balloon which held it up, if that was how it worked, must have been about 12 feet long, he felt, measuring the distance by the size of the room in which he sat. The rubber was smoky gray in color and scattered over an area about 200 yards in diameter. When the debris was gathered up, the tin foil, paper, tape, and sticks made a bundle about 3 foot long and 7 or 8 inches thick, while the rubber made a bundle about 18 or 20 inches long and about 8 inches thick. In all, he estimated the entire lot would have weighed maybe 5 pounds. There was no sign of any metal in the area, which might have been used for an engine, and no sign of any propellers of any kind, although at least one paper fin had been glued on to some of the tinfoil. There were no words to be found anywhere on the instrument, although there were letters on some of the parts. Considerable Scotch tape and some tape with flowers printed upon it had been used in the construction. No strings or wire were to be found, but there were some eyelets in the paper to indicate that some sort of attachment may have been used. Brazel said that he had previously found 2 weather observation balloons on the ranch, but what he found this time did not in any way resemble either of these. Quote, "I am sure what I found was not any weather observation balloon," he said, "but if I find anything else besides a bomb, they're going to have a hard time getting me to say anything about it." Unquote. The next piece is a very short one, a blurb really, from the Seattle Times. Oh, I'm sorry, this one is not the one I was thinking of. It's still shorter than the previous, but it's not quite a blurb. It is from the Seattle Times, July 9th, first page, and also included the Associated Press wire photo of Brazel. Army story traveled as speedily as the disc. A New Mexico rancher who, in all innocence, indirectly started a world-girdling rumor yesterday that the United States Army had a flying disc in its possession, summed it all up in awed tones today. Quote, "Lord, how the story has traveled," unquote. The rancher, W.W. Brazel, 48 years old, of Roswell, New Mexico, told the Associated Press, quote, "I asked the sheriff to keep it kinda quiet," unquote. Sheriff George Wilcox kept it quiet all right, reporting Brazel's find, which turned out to be a harmless high-altitude weather balloon, only to officers at the Roswell Army Airfield. But a public relations officer announced that the Army had a flying disc, and it made headlines briefly around the world. Lieutenant Warren Hott, the public relations officer, said flatly, quote, "The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality when the intelligence office of the 509th Atomic Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc," unquote. Within a few hours, however, Brigadier General Roger M. Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force, with headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas, debunked the public relation officer's story. Unquote. RoswellProof.com. That is the name of the website. I wrote it down here. Very good of me to write that there. Okay, following that, we have some foreign ones. These newspaper clippings I retrieved from Steve Quill's Empire Beneath the Ice, chapter... Oh, I didn't include the chapter number, but it's called German Saucers Take Flight. From the London Times, U.S. Army to examine a flying disc, from our correspondent in Washington, July 8, 1947. After an Army announcement from Roswell, New Mexico, that an object resembling a flying disc has been found there, the commander of the 8th Air Force said here tonight that the object was being sent to the research center at Wright Field, Ohio for examination, unquote. That is on page 136, if you have a copy. Roswell Daily Record. Okay, this is actually the original announcement from July 8th. Roswell Army Air Force captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. No details of flying disc are revealed. Roswell hardware man and wife report disc seen. The intelligence office of the 509th Bombardment Group at Roswell Army Airfield announced at noon today that the field has come into possession of a flying saucer. According to information released by the department over authority of Major Jesse A. Marcel, intelligence officer, the disc was recovered on a ranch in the Roswell vicinity after an unidentified rancher had notified Sheriff George Wilcox here that he found the instrument on his premises. Major Marcel and a detail from his department went to the ranch and uncovered the disc, it was stated. After the intelligence officer here had inspected the instrument, it was flown to higher headquarters. The intelligence officer stated that no details of the saucer's construction or appearance had been revealed. Mr. and Mrs. Dan Wilmot apparently were the only persons in Roswell who saw what they thought was a flying disc. They were sitting on their porch at 105 South Pennsylvania last Wednesday night at about 10 o'clock when a large glowing object zoomed out of the sky from the southeast, going in a northwestern direction at a high rate of speed. Wilmot called Mrs. Wilmot's attention to it, and both ran down into the yard to watch. It was in sight less than a minute, perhaps 40 or 50 seconds, Wilmot estimated. Wilmot said that it appeared to him to be about 1,500 feet high and going fast. He estimated between 400 and 500 miles an hour. In appearance, it looked oval in shape, like two inverted saucers faced mouth to mouth, or like two old-type wash bowls placed together in the same fashion. The entire body glowed as though light were showing through from the inside, though not like it would be if a light were underneath. From where he stood, Wilmot said the object looked to be about 5 feet in size, apparently 5 feet tall, and making allowance for the distance it was from town, he figured that it must have been 15 to 20 feet in diameter, though this was just a guess. Wilmot said that he heard no sound, but the Mrs. Wilmot said she heard a swishing sound for a very short time. The object came into view from the southeast and disappeared over the treetops in the general vicinity of 6 Mile Hill. Wilmot, who is one of the most respected and reliable citizens in town, kept the story to himself, hoping that someone else would come out and tell about having seen one, but finally today decided that he would go ahead and tell about it. The announcement that the Roswell Army Airfield was in possession of one came only a few minutes after he decided to release the details of what he had seen. Unquote. The next one is from the San Francisco Chronicle, July 9th, 1947. Roswell statement. The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bombardment Group of the 8th Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through to cooperation of one of the local ranchers and the sheriff's office of Chavez County. The flying object landed on a ranch near Roswell sometime last week. Not having phone facilities, the rancher stored the disc until such a time as he was able to contact the sheriff's office, who in turn notified Major Jesse A. Marcel of the 509th Bomb Group Intelligence Office. Action was immediately taken and the disc was picked up at the rancher's home. It was inspected at the Roswell Army Airfield and subsequently loaned by Major Marcel to higher headquarters. United Press, only meager details of flying disc given. Kite-like device found in New Mexico, studied by Army, by William F. McMenamin. Washington, July 8, 1947. UP? Oh, United Press. Okay. The mystery of the flying saucers took a new twist tonight with the disclosure that the Army Air Forces has discovered a strange object in New Mexico and is forwarding it to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, for examination. Announcement of the find first came from Roswell, New Mexico Army Air Base, where a saucer was found 3 weeks ago. Army Airfield headquarters later revealed that a security lid had been clamped on all but the sketchiest details of the discovery. Army Airfield spokesman would say only that the saucer was flimsily constructed kite-like object, measuring about 25 feet in diameter and covered with a material resembling tinfoil. A telephonic report from Brigadier General Roger B. Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force at Fort Worth, Texas, said the purported saucer was badly battered when discovered by a rancher at Corona, 75 miles northwest of Roswell, New Mexico. Ramey scoffed at the possibility that the object could have attained the supersonic speeds credited to the, quote, flying saucers, allegedly spotted in recent weeks. He reported that the object was too lightly constructed to have carried anyone and that there was no evidence that it had a power plant of any sort. It bore no identification marks, and Ramey emphasized that no one had seen it in flight. Army Airfield sources ruled out the possibility that it might have been an Army weather kite. Helium balloons have been used for weather recording for the past 7 or 8 years. They said it had been sent to Fort Worth by Super Fortress for transshipment to the Army Airfield Experimental Center at Dayton. Army airfield commanders in New Mexico refused to permit the object to be photographed on the grounds that it was high-level stuff, although Ramey indicated that he was not attaching too great of an importance to the find pending an investigation. The Roswell announcement came from Colonel William H. Blanchard, commanding officer of the Roswell Army Air Base, who specifically described the discovery as a flying disc. He said the disc had been forwarded to higher headquarters, presumably the commanding general of the Air Force at Fort Worth, Texas. Blanchard would reveal no further details. Sheriff George Wilcox of Roswell said the disc was found about 3 weeks ago by W.W. Brizzell, the name is misspelled here, on the Foster Ranch at Corona, 75 miles northwest of Roswell. Wilcox said that Brizzell does not have a phone and so did not report finding the disc until the day before yesterday. Brizzell told the sheriff he didn't know just what the disc was, but that at first it appeared to be a weather meter. The sheriff's office notified the Army, which sent intelligence officers to pick up the object. Then today, the Army announced possession of a disc. The sheriff quoted Brizzell as saying the object, quote, seemed more or less like tinfoil. The rancher described the disc as about as large as a safe in the sheriff's office. The safe is about 3 1/2 by 4 feet. And that is the last newspaper clipping that we have. And that leaves only the Twinning Memo to wrap up this episode. And I am going to skip the top section that seems to be just weird numbers and letters. It will be attached in the description box below, so you can look at that for yourself if you want to. The date on it is the 23rd of September, 1947. The subject is AMC opinion concerning flying discs. It is to Commanding General, Army Air Forces, Washington 25, D.C. Attention, Brigadier General George Schooligan. 1. As requested by AC/AS-2, there is presented below the considered opinion of this command concerning the so-called flying discs. This opinion is based on interrogation report data furnished by AC/AS-2 and preliminary studies by personnel of 2-2 and Aircraft Laboratory Engineering Division on T-3. This opinion was arrived at in a conference between personnel from the Air Institute of Technology, Intelligence T2, Office Chief of Engineering Division, and the Aircraft Power Plant and Propeller Laboratories of Engineering Division T3. 2. It is the opinion that A. The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. B. There are objects probably approximating the shape of a disc of such appreciable size as to appear to be as large as man-made aircraft. C. There is a possibility that some of the incidents may be caused by natural phenomena such as meteors. D. The reported operating characteristics such as extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, particularly in roll, an action which must be considered evasive when sighted or contacted by friendly aircraft and radar, lend belief to the possibility that some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely. E. The apparent common description of the object is as follows. 1. Metallic of light reflecting surface. 2. Absence of a trail except in a few instances when the object apparently was operating under high performance conditions. 3. Circular or elliptical in shape, flat on bottom and domed on top. 4. Several reports of well-kept formation flights varying from 3 to 9 objects. 5. Normally no associated sound except in 3 instances where a substantial rumbling roar was noted. 6. Level flight speeds normally above 300 knots are estimated. F. It is possible within the present U.S. knowledge, provided extensive detailed development is undertaken, to construct a piloted aircraft which has the general description of the object in subparagraph E above, which would be capable of an approximate range of 7,000 miles at subsonic speeds. G. Any development in this country along the lines indicated would be extremely expensive, time-consuming, and at the considerable expense of current projects, and therefore, if directed, should be set up independently of existing projects. Due consideration must be given to the following. 1. The possibility that these objects are of domestic origin, the product of some high-security project not known to AC/AS-2 or this command. 2. The lack of physical evidence in the shape of crash-recovered exhibits which would undeniably prove the existence of these objects. And 3. The possibility that some foreign nation has a form of propulsion, possibly nuclear, which is outside of our domestic knowledge. 3. It is recommended that A. Headquarters, Army Air Forces, issue a directive assigning a priority security classification and a code name for a detailed study of this matter to include the preparation of complete sets of all available and pertinent data, which will then be made available to the Army, Navy, Atomic Energy Commission, JRDB, the Air Force Scientific Advisory Group, NACA, and the RAND and NEPA projects for comments and recommendations, with a preliminary report to be forwarded within 15 days of receipt of the data, and a detailed report thereafter every 30 days as the investigation develops. A complete interchange of data should be effected. 4. Awaiting a specific directive, AMC will continue the investigation with its current resources in order to more closely define the nature of the phenomenon. Detailed essential elements of information will be formulated immediately for transmittal through channels. In F. Twining, Lieutenant General, U.S. Commanding. And the reason that we will be discussing the Twinning Memo at all is because of the interesting fact that even though it is in December of 1947, Roswell is not mentioned in it. Now, it is worth noting that the authenticity of the Twinning Memo is completely in question. This literally just appeared in a guy's mailbox with no return address, no information as to who sent it or where it came from. Some fancy science was done that we'll discuss later by the team of Linda Moulton Howe, involving the identification of the typewriter and the ink used, and it was shown to be consistent with that from the office that this supposedly was printed from. And it also did show signs of being burned. However, it has never been quite officiated by the U.S. government, and its authenticity is still very, very highly debated. But if you listened closely, you would have noticed that in subparagraph H, section 2, it notes that there is a complete lack of physical evidence in the shape of crash-recovered exhibits, which would undeniably prove the existence of these objects. Now, many people, including myself and author Steve Quayle, which is the one that brought it to my attention in the first place, noted that if this was a fake, it would almost certainly mention Roswell, because it was all the rage. And there isn't a UFO buff in the world that would create a document like this and then say that no physical evidence had been found. So on one hand, this gives authenticity to the Twinning Memo, but it also casts some doubt on the Roswell incident at the same time. Or, if you believe that the Roswell incident did occur, perhaps it was above Twining's pay grade, or perhaps the Twinning Memo was a fake. So really, it's to be taken with a grain of salt and analyzed. We will be discussing the Twinning Memo in more depth. It probably will have its own episode here in the future because there is a lot of research into it, especially by Miss Linda Moulton Howe and her team, that we don't have the time to go into right now, and I don't have it in front of me to go into it right now. But it does apply to the Roswell incident, and so we will be discussing it in our future videos on Roswell. Thank you for joining us for this video. I hope you found it interesting. This would be the 4th video that I recorded in a row, so forgive me for messing up a little bit on that one. Wanted to get as many recorded done in one sitting as possible. So I hope that you will be joining us for our future videos. Thank you for listening.